My name's Steve Cochran, and this is End Time Insights. In this edition, we're going to continue a discussion I've been having with a man who I claim to be a prophet. Folks, I'm 56 years old, and in my lifetime, I've said this repeatedly, I've only known there to be two people who were actually caught out of their body. An out-of-body experience, not a dream, not a vision, no, caught out of their body, taken to heaven to witness the end of the world as the church will know it. One man's name is John Paul Jackson. He's passed and gone and no longer with us. Another still is with us. This is part 2 to my interview with this prophet. Join me now in another studio. I want you again to welcome Danny Davis.
Well, thank
you for being here.
Yes.
I really appreciate it. This is a pleasure. To recap last week's show, you were having a bad day. You were getting out of the ministry. You were calling it quits.
Correct.
You were out of it. Yeah. And God, even in the middle of a bad day, folks, knows how to show up and help you and encourage you to go on. That, I would say, probably is what's kind of going on here with you. At least it seems like it. If you're out, God wants to come down this particular day in the middle of this bad day. You're out of the ministry. In the middle of the morning, I believe you said it was 3 a.m., I'm not going to call this a vision. I'm not going to call it a dream. You had an encounter. You were taken out of your body.
I'd have to call it an out-of-body experience because my spirit was taken out of my body. I was awake when it happened.
Mm-hmm. There's only one other man I ever met, and his name was John Paul Jackson, who was taken out of his body. Everybody else has had visions. People have dreams. Yeah. It's rare that you have somebody who's taken out of their body. I mean, other than John Paul Jackson, we got to go back, to the Bible days, when Paul was caught up.
Right.
So this is a very unique experience. Now, I want you to take us back, which is where we'll start back again. Take us, you're caught up, you're looking at yourself, you think you look silly laying there on the bed. Right. And you're caught up and you see clouds as if a storm is coming and impending danger if I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, that's correct. My spirit was removed from my body in a little apartment in East Lansing, Michigan, lifted up above the United States of America, and then stood upright facing toward the east. And as I stood there in the middle of the air, my spirit is hovering miles up in the atmosphere. I began to see storm clouds rolling in all around me. There was if you've ever lived in Michigan, which you probably have not, before they have a tornado, the air almost gets like a yellowish brown. Mm-hmm. And this is the way the atmosphere was where I was standing, and clouds were rolling in. And I remember thinking, this feels dangerous. Is it good to be here? Mm-hmm. And it actually felt very threatening as I was hovering miles up in the air above the state of Michigan. I began to think within myself, is this safe for me to be here?
Wow.
And suddenly I began to feel a presence coming up behind me, a glorious presence. And there was perfect peace as that presence got closer and closer.
That's good.
And the air all around me got brighter and brighter as that presence was coming up from behind me. And I wanted to turn and look because I knew it was Jesus, but I was not allowed to see him. After all, I wasn't there because I was doing such a great job in the ministry. I was there because I decided to quit.
Yeah.
And Jesus came up from behind me, and he was standing right to my side. And I heard a voice that sounded like thunder rolling. And he said, "Son of man, behold." And it sounded like thunder rolling. And as he said that, he threw his hand out, and I could see out of my peripheral vision a hole. And it was right here in his wrist. Now, up until that point in my life, I thought they put the holes in his hands, the palm of his hands. But it was in his wrist, and there was a glimmering white robe hanging down off his arm. And it was so white, it wasn't white, it was more like energy. It wasn't like any white I've ever seen in a garment. It radiated like energy. And when he said, "Son of man, behold," he threw his hand out, and the clouds parted. And as soon as those storm clouds parted, I knew who controlled the winds and the waves.
That's
and
cool.
I was looking
That's
across
good.
America toward the east coast of America, as though being allowed to see thousands of miles across the United States of America. And that is how my vision began.
So you're being taken across America. Let's just say that's where we're going to go with this.
Yes.
You're looking at America. You're up in the air. Jesus is with you. This is where I believe some of this is actually going to become timely. That I believe one of the opening things you saw, and this is in no particular order, I don't know, I'm just going off some of the things you said, that you saw, and I want you to kind of explain this, you saw a virus, or at least something like that was going on, and I don't understand.
In the early parts of my vision or out-of-body experience, whatever you want to call it, I saw problems begin to escalate in America. They were problems men were struggling with, but they weren't overwhelming to a point that they couldn't work on solving them. And one of the first, I remember early on in my vision, I was actually looking at the outline of the whole United States. It was as though I were looking at a drawing or an outline of the whole entire United States.
Yeah.
And in the same time, I could sense people were dying all around me on both sides of the United States, right in the middle of the United States, where it was hovering. It was like I was looking at little black dots, and they began to get more and more of them covering the United States, and it just began to escalate. And I knew instantly I was looking at some kind of a killer virus. And I remember back 40 years ago thinking maybe I was seeing the AIDS virus. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I knew it was something medical science couldn't help humans with. They were dying. It was a judgment, one of the judgments that God was allowing to come upon the United States of America.
One of the many dominoes that appear to be falling.
Right.
What you see after this.
Exactly.
I don't want to alarm anybody, because I think we already have enough of that going on. America and even the world is panicking over this coronavirus, and I think, folks, there's a lot of hype. When you have a mortality rate of 3 or 4% is where I think we're at right now. I'm not exactly sure. It's not. I don't want to belittle 3 or 4%. I don't want to belittle 5, or even if it came to 10. It doesn't mean everybody's going to die. And yet that's kind of where we're going with this. Americans are emptying the stores in some cases, and some things are just completely irrelevant to the coronavirus. I mean, we got people buying up toilet paper. What has toilet paper got to do with a virus? And we're going to have more bowel movements? I don't understand some of the thinking behind. Right. It doesn't make any sense. No. So, but it shows you the panic on something that isn't going to wipe anybody out. We're not going to be wiped out. That America doesn't know how to respond to sometimes even the smallest things. And like I said, I'm not belittling 3 or 4% or whatever it is, but it's certainly. Now, there's one thing I want to kind of interject here, that John Paul Jackson, who I said I mentioned, I had known, he said he saw.
The Lord told me that there would be a pandemic that came, but the first one would prove to be little but fear, but the second one that comes would be serious. So there's a pandemic that is going to be coming.
I tend to believe that's what this is, this coronavirus. What I know, Brother Steve, what I was saying was a pandemic. It was, it was wiping out large portions of the population. And there was no solution for it. That much I know what I saw, and that's what I saw.
And where I'm going with this is that this seems more like just a scare, not anything that could do what Danny saw. And that's the way John Paul said it. He said he saw one virus come out, and it would just turn out to be more of a scare.
Precursor.
Yeah. Okay. But there will be another one that would follow.
Yes.
And that one would be bad.
That's what I
did. And that makes more sense. But the point I'm trying to bring out here is the way Americans respond, and how we just get into this panic mode sometimes, and we start just buying up all things that doesn't even matter because we're worried about next month. Supposedly next month we're not going to have some supplies down there, and like I say, we're taking it all the way to toilet paper.
Americans aren't ready for what lies ahead. They're not. They're not prepared for what the future holds for this country.
In the opening stages of your encounter, and I'm going to call it an encounter because you were wide awake.
Yes.
Unless you want to say it's a vision of you looking at yourself, doesn't make any sense. So I mean, obviously you left your body.
If I had not been awakened before God took my spirit out of my body with that surge of electricity, I promise you, I probably would not have believed it.
Yeah.
I would not have believed
and I'm
it.
going to tell you this: there are people who aren't going to believe this, and yet
No,
I tried to, like in the first program. I don't want you guys to miss it. In the first program, I gave a little of my testimony as to how this man changed my life, and I'm a living testament to the things I experienced was because of him. And when it came to the anointing and the things he's talking about, I never was caught out of my body or anything like that. In fact, like I say, I've only known one other person that ever was. That was John Paul Jackson. But I've experienced other things he has, and it was because of him. So I'm trying to tell you, the man's not lying. This isn't a game. This is not your imagination. You really experienced this.
It
now
happened. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You saw, again at the beginning, somewhere in the opening stages somewhere, I'm just pulling things out, again, no particular order. You saw shortages. You saw something was happening with the gas prices.
Let me kind of set the stage here a little bit and I've shared this with you. In the 3.5 hours that my spirit was out of my body, and you showed me the significance of that. I'm not a Bible scholar when it comes to prophecy.
We're going to talk to that.
Yeah, but the front end of my vision was all in vivid color. Mm-hmm. Everything I was seeing happening in the United States of America was in vivid color, and there came a turning point where everything became stark black and white, and that's when things escalated.
Got bad.
Beyond bad. Beyond anything I could.
Which is where we're headed.
Put into words. If America knew the things that I saw and knew perhaps how close they are, there would probably, you want to talk about pandemonium, then we would have pandemonium in the United States.
No, that's why I'm bringing this up, because right now I'm not belittling the coronavirus. I'm not saying people aren't being hurt, and I'm not belittling that at all. But I don't believe the coronavirus is what he saw. And as I would try to put it in context, I would say, like what John Paul Jackson saw, he saw a scare came out first, but there would be another one that would follow that would be bad. So I would say this is just a scare part of it. I would say this is the virus. It's not bad, but there is another one coming. And based on a scare, get a load of this. He saw, when it came to the shortages and gas prices, weren't they somewhere there? They were skyrocketing at some point.
So I remember at the end of my vision. Now you have to realize I'm telling people this back in 1978, but I knew that gas somehow during the beginnings of what I saw happen, that gas prices would be hovering between $7 and $8.
That's crazy. Even today, it just doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean,
gas was 60 cents or something like that back then. And I remember that stuck out in my mind when I came out of that vision, that gas prices would be across America between $7 and $8. Mm-hmm. I need to say, so between $7 and $8 when these things began to happen. And so I feel like that is kind of a little bit of a timeline to what people need to be looking toward.
I would, and based again on what is going on. I mean, we're already seeing the shortages. I mean, could you imagine a real virus that's really bad?
Oh, yeah.
How we're going to act at that point?
Yes.
So you mentioned something regarding foods and the basic necessities. You said at one point you were taken down into a store.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us?
Whenever you're seeing things in the spirit realm as opposed to the natural realm, time isn't the same. The way you view things isn't the same. I would like to be able to explain how I was looking at things when I would be able to narrow right in on something specific. Mm-hmm. But it was like looking through almost like a concave lens. Mm-hmm. You're there looking through this lens at specific things, and I was in the store, in the Midwest, and I saw a family come in. The shelves were empty. There was no food on the shelves. There was some stuff on the floor where they had that store had been slammed. Very like what's going on with this coronavirus right now, where people are hitting the.
They're overreacting already.
They're overreacting, but this people were trying. There was such a desperation to get food. I remember seeing a family that were standing in the section where bread and that type of food was sold, and a little child looking up at its mother and the father, and I could see nothing but anxiety in their face because they couldn't figure out how they're going to put food on their table for the family. And I knew that. I knew that. Yeah.
That's crazy. But again, we're already getting a taste of it. We're getting a little glimpse off of a scare. Now, you mentioned that you saw at some point they started to rely on the government, the soup lines. Do you remember who was in the line?
I was hovering over Chicago in this part of the vision. And I looked right down in downtown Chicago, and I saw a line that looked like it went for blocks and blocks and blocks. And I saw people standing in line, but here's the strange thing is it didn't matter what status in life you were in. As I saw people standing in that line, I saw people that looked like stockbrokers wearing $1,000 suits standing in line with blue-collar workers and even homeless people. They were
all kinds of people.
They're all in the same line. It didn't matter.
Didn't matter who you were.
Didn't matter
what status you had.
Or what status you had, or how much money you felt you had. You were still in that soup line, waiting to get a bite to eat.
That suggests to me several things. One, if you are a stockbroker and you got all this money, I would think you know how to prepare if you knew something was coming.
Yeah.
If I saw a storm coming, and I was the guy that was wealthy, I'd prepare. Yeah. But it sounds like I don't care who you are, everybody was taken off guard.
They were all in the same boat.
This was more like a suddenly.
I believe it was, because the people that I saw standing in that line, some of them, there's no way you would, in your mind, in the world we live in today, think of them being in that line. They wouldn't need to be there. They'd buy their way out of it. So their money obviously wasn't worth anything.
And that's another point that you can get just by who you see in there, that either there was no supply or their money no longer worked for them.
That's my thought.
So you got to suddenly, and you got, or you don't have supply to where I can't get it, or it could be both. Money doesn't work for you anymore anyway.
Yeah.
But it could
something.
But the suddenly's there.
Wasn't functioning the way it is now anymore.
A point that I want to make that if you're paying attention, folks, that these are in many cases simply the results. They're just, you're seeing the effects. You don't have the answers to why the soup line's there, you just know it's there.
Yeah.
You don't know what did it, and I find that it may have something to do with the virus. Who really knows? But it looks like things are beginning to tick away.
This is kind of a strange analogy to give you, but one time I was driving back from a revival, back to California from a revival in Arizona, and I'm coming down the 10 freeway, and I came up on an accident, and so I pulled over. It had just happened, and I pulled over, and there's blood all over. There's children's coloring books strewn out in front of the car. Mm-hmm. I look in the car, there's someone moaning in the car, and so I came up on that accident just after it happened, and I saw the aftermath of that accident.
Yeah.
And I would have to tell you that everything I saw in my vision was an aftermath.
Yeah.
In other words, I was looking at the cause and effect.
The effects, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like being able to
see the cause.
Yeah, I'd see the cause.
Yeah.
I was seeing the effect.
Yeah,
I kept seeing the effect. The Lord was allowing me to see the effect of what was happening in the world, and so I often thought of that accident I saw. I'm there right after it happened, and I remember how horrible it was, and waiting for the ambulance to get there. That's how I felt in my vision. I'm seeing things that so horrible that it happened, but they had just happened. You mentioned at one part somewhere that you believed that at least somewhere, again, I'd say this more towards the opening, I'm assuming, that you saw people committing, or you understood, I don't want to put words into your mouth, that people were committing crimes or forfeiting their freedom just to get food. Yeah.
Does that...
desperation. Early on in my vision, there was a sense of desperation. There's no the things we call in the world we live in right now, stability and
that was gone.
Security.
Yeah.
It was gone. Security was gone, and there are a lot of lukewarm Christians right now that aren't ready for what lies ahead in America.
They're not ready for
because their world is getting ready to be rocked.
Yes. Everything is going to be shaken, can be shaken. At one point, this is all occurring you're looking at different portions of America, and at one point, you're whisked away to overseas.
Yep, early on in the vision, by the way.
Okay, so this is all right around.
Yeah, this is the
Makes sense.
incredible thing. Early on in my vision, the Lord's starting to show me the beginnings of sorrows in America, and then bang, at the speed of thought, I'm taking it around the world, and I'm hovering over the Euphrates River. I remember saying, "Where am I?" And I knew it was the Euphrates River, but it was dried up. The area I was in, part of the Euphrates River had dried up, and I'm looking down on a dry riverbed in the Middle East, in the Euphrates River, an 1,800-mile-long river. A section of it had dried up, and I'm looking down in what I would call the hotbed of demonic activity in the world. It was the Euphrates River, and I was taken there early on in my vision and shown something that was just it was unbelievable. I shared it with you. I saw translucent frogs. If you ever took a sandwich bag and filled it full of water, these frogs were coming up out of this dry lake bed, this river bed.
So this is in the spirit realm.
In the spirit realm.
Yes,
I'm watching.
You've been watching the physical, and now you're looking into the spirit.
I'm looking in the spirit, and I knew the Lord was right behind me, and I said, Jesus, what am I seeing? And he said, these are demon spirits that Satan has held in reserve for these end times. And these demon spirits were coming up out of this Euphrates River bed, and they looked like translucent frogs, and they were just all over the world. They were leaping into men's chests. They were leaping into their hearts. I could see there were anyone that would influence large groups of people. They were going into their chest, and there was a demonic strongholds that were. And I knew that these demon frogs had the power to get everybody to agree about what they thought.
That's crazy.
They had that ability to bring
possession
and satanic powers into agreement throughout the world. They were able to bring people in.
And you weren't imagining all of this. You weren't looking at some new strain of toad or.
No, no, not at all. It was
not a tadpole or.
No, it was so real, and I watch the news these days and how people, if they've got a demonic agenda, they all agree. All these reporters agree. All these movie stars agree. They all have the same thought.
It's coming from hell. You know where the source is, and
it is. It's a last day assault upon mankind, a demonic assault. That probably was the most prominent thing I saw, and it was bringing the world over into a place where it agreed. It agreed for all of the evil to happen.
And then, that's basically what you saw there.
Yeah.
And then you were, I assume, whisked back.
At the speed of thought. I mean, it just, that fast I was there, that fast I was back.
Wow, and that would make sense. I mean, that is, I want to give, because we're wrapping up again, we're running out of time again, I want to give a little thought that I noted, that when you came back, or I'm assuming this is when you came back, again, this is just notes I'm taking from you, you wound up, we're not going to get into this, but he wound up seeing the West Coast, California, black. Is that?
It's true. There was no power.
There was no power.
The power grid was down.
Might as well ask you a little question since I got a matter of seconds left, but a little portion of California, or?
The entire state, top to bottom, it was cloaked in darkness. It was later in the vision, midways in the vision, as things started failing at an accelerated rate.
Okay. I'm going to give you the quote again, because you can already tell where this is headed. This is a quote again from Danny Davis, and we are going to get more into this in the next show, that you do not want to miss the next show. Danny said again, he saw lawlessness, a breakdown of order across the country, rioting, destruction, fires, senseless murder, chaos, and theft by force. I got more to say. Don't go anywhere. Many of you are flipping channels, trying to figure out what's God saying to the body right now. Endlessly flipping through channels, surfing the internet, trying to hear, what is God saying? I'm telling you what this man is saying is a sure word. Let me even give you the devil's advocate position in this. When I first attended his church over 35 years ago, the man was adamant about pre-trib. He would preach pre-trib, and yet he would also speak of this encounter. And he didn't know how to rectify the two because the two don't mix, which you're going to find out. That's just one way. I mean, if the guy was fabricating something, you at least think his encounter jived with Scripture, and yet the encounter didn't jive. I just want you to consider that should tell you the man was telling the truth from the very get-go, and this is a sure word, folks. You're going to want to get this book. We have the book, and we have the behind the scenes on a DVD. So technically, here's what you're going to get. The book, a DVD with 3 shows and a behind the scenes. Let me give you the behind the scenes that's never going to air. Let me give you a little example. What you just got in hearing the man say, he's looking at California when he's whisked back, right? He's looking at the West Coast. He says California's black. What didn't air, and I don't believe is going to be aired on anything that you hear, but is more or less a behind the scenes kind of discussion. I asked him, I said, did you see into Oregon? Did you see into Washington? He said he saw no state lines. All he knew, here's a quote, from top to bottom of the West Coast, from the top to the bottom was completely black. And for all he knew, is that parts of California may have even been missing. That's a practical, almost identical quote to what he said. Now I need you to get this, folks. And in the behind the scenes, listen to me. The behind the scenes gets kind of brutal. It's not really meant for Christian television. That's why we chose not to put the 4th show, the behind the scenes, on television. So here's what I want you to do, folks. You're never going to get to see the behind the scenes. It's not going to be aired. But you can get this now. You can pre-order it, and you can get it in about 2 to 3 weeks. About the time the 3rd show airs, you should get your packet in the mail. You'll get the book, his encounter. You'll get the DVD with 3 shows and the behind the scenes, folks. Offer number 29, I believe, is what it is. You're going to want this. And I'll tell you this, do not miss next week's 3rd show. Get ready, folks. Look for more to come. Until next time, take care and God bless.